Welcome to the Prepped and Polished Podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
And welcome back to the Prepped and Polished Podcast. This is episode 176. Be sure to join our community. You can find us on all the social media channels. Just type Prepped and Polished. And go to our site, preppedandpolished.com, for more info or tutoring. We work online, in person, 781-753-9951. And be on the lookout for our new website. It's coming out in the fall. Let's get right to today's guest. Today on episode 176, I have return guest Erica Katz. She came on our show for episode 100. It's been a while, and we have her back for 176. She's a nationally acclaimed teen and parenting expert, and she's the author of the upcoming book, Coach Parenting, Raising Teenagers with Advice from Pro Football's Greatest Head Coaches. She's also written Bonding Over Beauty, and she can be seen on the Mom Jury segment of the Today Show with Kathy Lee and Hoda. She's a frequent guest on Access Hollywood, Fox News Inside Edition, The Doctors, NBC News New York, Fox New York, Telemundo. Erica is the on-air spokesperson for Invisalign Clear Aligners. And she discusses parenting topics in the news, the impact of social media on teens as well as lifestyle. On today's episode, Erica talks about her new book, Coach Parenting, and we learn from the best NFL coaches on how to best parent teenagers. So let's get right to it, to our guest, episode 176 with Erica Katz. Erica Katz, welcome back to the Prepped and Polished Podcast. How are you today?
It's so great to be here. How are you?
Doing well, hanging in there. So can you remind our audience of your background and just focus on some moments that really led you to where you are today as a nationally recognized expert, for teens and parents?
Well, when I wrote my first book, my kids were going through the tween years, and I really wanted to connect with them, and so I wrote my first book, Bonding Over Beauty, and then I started to do a lot of television appearances about the book and about parenting, and I really got into the world of what it is to be a parent, and having a boy and a girl, I had different experiences, and so as they went into the teen years, I found that teaching them to control themselves was not that easy because you have a lot of influences like social media and friends. And so one day I asked my son to pick up his shoes that were in the living room, and he didn't do it. And I asked him again. Of course, he didn't do it. I asked him again. And the third time I was like, if you don't pick up those shoes, I'm throwing them in the garbage. So he picks them up and he sort of tosses them in his room. And I was like, wow, that didn't go very well. The following week I was at his varsity basketball game, and his coach was like, can you pick up the cones and the balls and your shoes and the shoes of your teammates? And he says, yes, coach, I'm on it. And I turned to his coach. I said, how did you do that? He says, you just have to hold them accountable and show them you mean business.
Nice.
And all of a sudden, I said to myself, I wonder if there's something I can learn from coaches. So at the time, I decided to read some coaching books. And my son was a New York Giants fan, so I started with Coach Tom Coughlin's book. And I was reading through his coaching advice that could be used in the workplace or wherever, and I started to implement some of the things I read about at home. And I couldn't believe how quickly I was able to change the dynamic in my family. And so that's really how this book came about.
That's amazing. So your new book, it's called Coach Parenting, Raising Teenagers with the Advice from Pro Football's Greatest Head Coaches. Who is this book for?
So this book is for parents, men and women, raising tweens and teens, boys and girls. While there's a lot of football theme to it, it's really a book that will help your kids to be successful and independent, and also take control of your family. So if you think about a football team, the players do not run the plays. The coach coaches the team. And so as parents, it's very hard with kids on their phones to really know what they're doing all the time. And so the best thing that we can do is teach them how to control themselves, because we can't control them, nor do we want to, because we do not want them living in our basement until they're 40 years old. We want them to be successful and grown up. And so this book is really for anybody working with tweens and teens. And the reason I say tweens is because the earlier you start coach parenting, as I call it, the easier it is, because when your kids understand that you're the boss and they're not the boss, things go a lot better at home.
That's awesome. So in your book, Coach Mooch of the Green Bay Packers tells you that a successful coach, like a devoted parent, is a great teacher and uses a combination of love and discipline. So do you think, you think successful parenting requires a combination of love and discipline?
Absolutely. Because if you think about it, your kids, you know who put it best? I interviewed Bob Costas, the broadcaster, and he said that every successful coach has three things. They have meticulous preparation, meaning they prepare their team for whatever's coming along. Flexibility, so they can adapt to their personnel. So at home, that means you could have one kid that's shy and one kid that's outgoing. You have to adapt to it. And the most important thing they have to have is the respect of the locker room. Not always the affection, but the respect. And so at home, the parents need to be respected by their kids. Now, your kids are not always going to like you. In fact, sometimes they won't. But they have to respect you. So when I say, and when Coach Mooch says a combination of discipline and love, your kids need to know that everything you do is coming from a place of love. For instance, my son didn't want to do his practice SAT, okay? I understand why he didn't want to do it, but he needed to do it, okay? And he's complaining, why are you making me do this? And I had to say, look, you just got to sit down and do this.
Yeah.
And you're doing this because I want you to have the opportunity to go to a great school and do well, and if you practice, this will help you. So yes, I was being disciplined, but I was also coming from a place of love, saying, your college experience is not for me, it's for you. I'm doing this for you. So that's the love and the discipline at the same time.
Of all the NFL coaches that you interviewed, any favorites?
I have to say I really enjoyed interviewing Coach John Harbaugh of the Baltimore Ravens. He's got the best stories. He's got a fantastic sense of humor, and he actually tells me a story in the book of how he uses humor to teach an important lesson, because sometimes we don't want to be lectured all the time. So he was saying that when they would have these classes, instead of saying to the guys, don't do something stupid, they have this 3-minute video they show of people on YouTube doing stupid things like riding a skateboard down the stairs and falling on a butt or whatever, just kind of funny things. And the guys end up laughing and having a good time, and they enjoy these videos. But what he's doing is he's using humor to convey a serious message. But I think that's a great lesson, that we can be funny. Not everything has to be so serious. You don't have to teach everybody everything in a very serious way. You can use humor. Another thing that I talk about a lot in the book is Coach Mike Shanahan, who coached the Denver Broncos, always talked about preparation, and now his son is the coach of the 49ers, and at one point they were coaching together, and he said we would look at what we were doing, what they were doing, and not just what we could have done differently, but what they could have done differently. He said that's just preparation. And so when you think of preparation at home, you can think of what would you do in a situation. So look at the news, look at the Kardashians, look at any celebrity out there. When something goes wrong for them, you bring it up with your kids and you talk about that. So instead of telling your kids, don't do this and don't do that, you say, hey, why do you think this was a mistake? What could they have done better? And so you're taking it off of them, and it becomes more of a conversation. And that's just preparation. So I really enjoy talking with these coaches because they all have a very different approach. Like when you talk to Coach Tom Coughlin, he was the New York Giants coach, he has a stricter way of being. He has rules, and this is what you have to do and when you have to do it. But the interesting thing, when I spoke to some of his players, they actually liked always knowing where they had to be and when they had to be there, because Lawrence Tynes, who was the place kicker, was saying athletes hate surprises. And, kids don't like surprises. They like routine. As much as they might push back, if you give them parameters and give them freedom within those parameters, it's a lot more secure for them. They know you love them. They know this is what you expect of them, and they have the wiggle room within those parameters. So I really enjoyed talking to Coach Coughlin, too, because his approach is a little more old school, but it really works. And one of the things he told me was his rule about everyone being on time. And I said, why is it so important to you that everyone's there 5 minutes early? And he said, because I want to know that you are excited to be at work. I want to know that you want to be there. And if you think about it with your kids, if you require them to be on time, if you require them to hand their homework in on time, they're telling you, I'm prepared, I'm organized, and I'm happy to be here. So I really learned a lot about time management from Coach Coughlin.
This is amazing. So what do you find that some parents do completely wrong when it comes to raising teens?
They don't give them a curfew. I think that's crazy. And here's the reason they don't do it. So now we have cell phones, so we can track our kids. So if you say to your kid, be home at 12, and it's 12 and they're not home, and you track them, and you say, oh, they're at Johnny's house, I know they're safe. Mm-hmm. Or you call them, and they're like, hey, Mom, I'm just running late, I'm at Johnny's house. We're like, okay, it's not a big deal. But you said to be home at 12, but they decided, well, they're not going to come home at 12. So your actions are belying your words. And as a result, if they don't have to adhere to that rule, why should they have to adhere to any other rule? So I think that's a big mistake parents make.
Wow, that's awesome. What else is going on with Erica Katz in the next couple of months? What are you working on now?
So I'm just going around the country to get the book out there. I'm trying to speak at different schools. A lot of schools have invited me to come speak.
Nice.
I'm going to be doing a lot of television to talk about the book. And I really want to get this message out there because I think there's so much that we can learn from these great football coaches. And the interesting thing about it is when I started the book, I really didn't know that much about football. I would watch a game, but I didn't really understand the importance of the coach. And so I would watch Hard Knocks and All or Nothing and anything I could watch on football coaches, and they're fascinating. And when I interviewed every single coach in this book and every single player in this book had wisdom. And every piece of wisdom applies to parenting. It could apply to your work life. If you're an athletic director, it could help you better with your team. It really is a book about leadership and about understanding how to adapt to different personalities, because you could have 4 different kids with 4 different personalities and 4 different needs. And from writing this book, I actually adapted some of the things into my daily life, and it's changed my life, meeting these people, talking to these people. And I hope that when you read it or anybody else reads it, they feel the passion that I have for this subject and for coaching and the admiration I have for the leadership of these people.
And how do we best get in touch with you and purchase your book?
So my book is available on Amazon.com, or
Nice.
you could go into your bookstore and ask for it. You can go on my website, which is ericakatz.com, and there's a little quiz on there, and you can figure out what type of coach parent you are. Are you a player's coach? Are
nice.
you more strict? Are you something in between? It's a fun little quiz. And so that's the best way to do it. And you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And I love to hear your comments, good and bad, whatever you have to say. I want to hear it. And I want to know how you brought it into your life and if it's changed anything in your life.
It's amazing. And last question is any tips of advice for teenagers getting ready for young adulthood, that transition period?
The most important thing you can do is understand that you don't have to post every single thing that comes to your head. Sometimes less is more. And remember, whatever you post, everybody's going to see it, even if you think it's private. Be careful in the group chats. There were just a bunch of kids who got into Harvard that didn't get into Harvard when somebody saw their group chat. So be really careful what you put out there, because not everyone's going to like it and not everyone's going to be nice. And so you have to be ready for that.
Awesome. This is amazing. Very inspiring. Erica, thanks for coming back on the Prepped and Polished podcast, and good luck with the book. Appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed episode 176 with Erica Katz. Listen to my other podcast with Erica. It was 100, our podcast on parenting tips on how to help your teens make friends in school. Tune in soon to hear our next podcast, episode 177, which will be our tutoring tips episode. To access today's episode, you can go over to preptopolish.com/podcast. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preptandpolish.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.